and welcome to our first class in Classroom English. Today I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the course that we're going to be going through this time, these next 20 lectures. We're going to start each class with a bit of an introduction like this. Then we will have a greeting. I will talk about what we're going to do in each lesson, and I'll explain things, I'll ask you questions, and at the end of each lecture, I will end with questions. I will ask you, what have you learned? And how can you use this information in your own classes? And at the end of each lesson also, I'll talk a little bit about what it is that we're going to do in the following lesson. The next class, tomorrow's class, if you do them one day at a time, the next class I will start with, what did we do in our last class? So tie those lessons together. That's something that I hope you are doing in your own classes as well. You start explaining what you're going to do, you do it, you end the class with explaining what you've just done. Okay, so today's class, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to look at children as learners. We're going to look at our students as children before we think about them as language learners. This is not exactly classroom English yet. We'll get to that in the second half of the class. But it's just to get an idea of who these kids are that are coming into our classrooms. And hopefully this will set a good foundation on which we can build an effective class, because we want to be better teachers. We want to create an environment where our students learn better. So after we talk about that, then we're going to go on to teaching young learners. Okay, remember, young learners are not just miniature versions of adults. We will look at them as young learners of English and then compare them to how they learn English compared to how they learn Korean. We'll look at that a little bit. And then finally, we'll get into some classroom English, where we'll look at how we can start our lessons in English. And that's especially important if you're in a public school and you've got the students all day long and you're the English teacher and you've got a math class and then you've got an English class and then you've got a social studies class. How do you suddenly switch from Korean to English in a natural way? And that can be a little bit tricky. So, who are we teaching? Okay, we need to look at our learners. We need to think about how young learners are different from older learners. Young learners are developing naturally and quickly as individuals. Okay, as the kids come into our classes at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the school year, or if you're working in a hagwon as the beginning of the term that you're teaching them, the kids that come in at the beginning are going to be quite different than the kids that leave your class at the end of the year. During that time, during that year that you're with them, or that 3 months or 6 months or a year, they will have grown a lot. They will have grown emotionally, they will have grown cognitively, and physically as well. They would have gotten a little bit bigger. Kids are naturally curious. I think we all know that. One of the things that I like to try and do is hang on to that curiosity of children. It's so easy to forget to be curious as we get older. Children love to play and use their imagination. That's kind of what being a kid is all about, right? Is playing and using your imagination. Children are pretty good at interpreting meaning without necessarily understanding the individual words. What does that mean? Well, children's vocabulary is pretty small, right? They don't know a lot of words to begin with, whether it's in their first language, L1, or their second language, in our case, English. Their vocabulary is very small, but they are often able to understand what you're talking about, as long as you're talking about things that relate to the kids' world. So they are pretty good at interpreting meaning, even though they don't understand exactly every single word. And this is related to the next one here. Children have a great skill in using limited vocabulary, limited language creatively, right? They don't have a lot of words, but they're still able to express themselves. And it's that's one of the great things about teaching kids, is that creativity with their imagination and with language as well. Children frequently learn indirectly rather than directly. What does it mean to learn directly? What does it mean to learn indirectly? Well, direct learning is sort of what we're doing in the classroom. I set up a lesson, and we're gonna study pronouns, personal pronouns, he, she, they. That's what we're focusing on today, directly teaching this. But while we're teaching things directly, they are also learning other things indirectly. They are learning by observing the world around them. Children, I'm laughing because of how true this is. Children really, truly enjoy talking, usually, and many children. We don't want to say all children, because some are naturally quiet and more reserved. But if you have a class of 10 students or 20 students, many of them are going to really, truly enjoy speaking. They may not like it as much in English because of other factors, but children tend to be much more social. And as they get older and they get into adolescence, then they start to get more nervous when they're speaking with other people. I've mentioned this already with creative language. Children have a ready imagination. Ready in this case means that it's right there, it's available all the time. Children are imaginative. They have a very active imagination. Children are less shy than adults when it comes to language learning. One difference from my experience, between teaching kids and teaching adults is when we become adults, we suddenly become very shy about making mistakes. Kids don't usually care about making mistakes. They'll say it again and again and again until they get it right. At some point, there's going to be frustrations, of course, but generally speaking, children are much less shy than adults when it comes to language learning. Adolescence, when they become teenagers, is when really things start to change a little bit. We get much more nervous about our own personal image by the time that we are in higher elementary school or middle school. I mentioned indirect learning a minute ago. What is indirect learning? Well, it's the things that we learn all the time when we're not in the classroom, right? We might, for example, as adults, we might learn to drive. We have direct education when we're learning to drive, but most of our education for driving comes from our experience of driving. The little things that we experience day by day are indirect learning. When I'm teaching about clothing styles, I'm teaching about the clothing styles, but the children are also learning a little bit about the culture, indirectly. I'm not directly teaching culture, but they're learning about culture through the things that I am teaching. They're learning indirectly. Think about this, kind of a question for you to think about. What is something that you know today that you didn't know yesterday? Just think about your day-to-day life. Hopefully, we are learning things every day, right? If we stop learning, I suppose then life isn't worth living anymore if we're not learning, if we're not continuing to learn. So we are learning a little bit every day, but most of our learning is indirect from our experience in the world. Children are very good at indirect learning. So whatever you've learned today, whatever you know today that you didn't learn yesterday, there's a pretty good chance that you learned that indirectly. Think about how you can use that in your classroom. How can you use that when you're teaching? What kind of lessons do you want to teach, even though you're not teaching those lessons directly? Okay, so here's something for the actual classroom, okay? Think of an activity in which the students have to guess phrases. in the student's mind, they're playing a game. It's a guessing game. But at the same time, linguistically, they're repeating vocabulary. They are confirming words that they had only half knew before. You know, as we're learning new words, we kind of have an idea of what they are. But as we're playing this vocabulary game, they are confirming those words. And maybe the word that they got wrong, they realize it's wrong, and they're forgetting the wrong meaning, and they're building up their knowledge. But we're playing a game, right? According to them, we're playing a game, but as they're playing a game indirectly, they are learning vocabulary, and they're learning language functions, okay? I have a strong belief about grammar, teaching grammar, especially to young children. And I think that if we teach reading a lot, we need to teach a lot less grammar, because the children learn it indirectly, right? This isn't a reading class, it's not a grammar class, it's a classroom English class. So let's actually get into starting lessons, okay? Now, I mentioned at the beginning of class, you are a elementary school teacher, for example, and you've got English as your third class of the day. You've had these kids for a couple hours already during the day, and now suddenly you have to become the English teacher, and you have to stop speaking to them in Korean like you've been speaking all day, all year, right? How do you do that naturally? How do you get them to switch naturally, especially with young learners? Well, one thing we can do at the beginning of English class is sing a song, okay? You're seeing me being nervous here because I'm singing. I'm not a good singer, but when I'm with kids, working with kids, singing doesn't matter. You don't have to be a good singer. But the weather song. What's the weather like today? Like today? Don't laugh at my singing. Okay. So you can do like the weather song. What day is today? There's a song about that. Whatever song it is, start the class with a song in English. It gets the kids a little bit active. They're having fun. Again, education and learning should be fun. It doesn't have to be serious studying all the time and memorizing things. Learning should be fun. Start our class with a song, and our English class starts by being fun. Okay, that's a good natural transition. And then after you sing the English song, then you transition yourself into speaking in English with your students. Okay, this one is good if you have a big class, and normally you're in a class where maybe the students are all sitting in pairs, right? A lot of the elementary school classrooms are in pairs, and now you want to rearrange the class and put them into groups of 4 students. Maybe every English class you are working in groups, you want them to be in 4. So at the beginning of your English class, a good way to transition into English is to physically change the room. If you've got 20 kids, you can change the room physically very quickly. If you are doing it yourself, changing everything out, that takes time. But if you've got, okay, we're gonna get into, it's time for English class, get into groups of 4. Once you do that 3 or 4 times, it becomes very fast. And our learners, our students can really change the shape of the room, the layout of the room very quickly and very easily. This physical change to the learning environment shows the learners that something is different. We are changing. Now it's time for English. Okay? Then when you sit back down in the new groups, the new layout, it's English time. Okay? That psychological break, that physical break, whether it's a song or whether it is moving. Okay. Putting on maybe you have an English hat or a badge that you put on that says "I love English" or "Speak to me in English" or something, or a vest. Okay, some kind of change in our uniform, in our clothing that we're wearing. This is my English jacket. Okay, I put this on. I'm the English teacher. Speak to me in English. I take this off, and we can speak in Korean. Okay, it's a psychological shift. The kids see that, and they know that you can speak in English during that time. Okay, it is a visually signaling to the students that there is a change. It's time to switch to English. A physical break. Physical breaks are great for kids, okay? I said at the beginning, kids are growing and they need to move. And if they've been sitting for too long, they start tapping their foot, they start moving around. When you start to notice that, as a teacher, you need to realize, okay, we need to move. These kids need to move. Similarly, kind of the opposite is when they're starting to feel a little bit sleepy. Maybe your class is right after lunch. We need to move, right? So one way we can do a transition from another class to an English class is with a physical break. They can stand up and stretch and wiggle and move their bodies using English prompts. Okay, so, okay, everybody stand up. Okay, now turn around. Okay, next we're going to raise our right hand, wave our left hand. We're going to wiggle like a worm. All of these things are physical. They're all transitions. This physical one is a good way, again, psychologically, now it's English class. And this physical break is, kids have long days and sometimes they just need to move. And this provides a way where they are following along, they're following the prompts, you're telling them what to do. You could combine this with a song. You can combine this with them moving the desks. Okay, it doesn't have to be one thing or another thing. Okay, some actual classroom English. Okay, so some expressions to start the day. I think most of you probably know these things, but it's our first day, and we're starting the class on our first day, and so we can start with expressions. Okay, good morning, class, if it's morning. Good afternoon, class, if it's afternoon. Hello, class. Hello, students. Hello, everybody. Hello, boys and girls. Hello, girls and boys. Good afternoon, boys and girls. For, I don't know, it's years and years and years, 25 years of teaching. Most of my classes, I started with hello, everyone. Class would start, people are sitting down in their desks. I'd say, hello, everyone, how are you today? And those two things together, how are you today? Hello, everyone, how are you today? And it's just, it's fine, okay. It's not so much energy all the time. And I might, at the beginning of class, when the students are coming in, we might need to, depending on your school, depending on your environment, you might need to check attendance. And so during that time, students are coming in, you're writing down who's present and who's not there. So if you are starting class, we can start with a dialogue like this. The T, of course, is teacher. The S is student. Jisoo is one student. Okay, the S is all together. Jisoo, Sumin. Okay, Korean class. Okay, so as a teacher, I'm the teacher. I would say, "Hello, class. How are you today?" And the students would say, sometimes they would say, "Good. We're great." Tired. Okay, the answers will vary on this, but hello, class. How are you today? Good. Teacher, who can remember what we did yesterday? Remember, raise your hand. Jisoo says, I don't know. She's not ready for class yet. She's not thinking yet. Jisoo, I don't know. Teacher, who can help Jisoo remember what we did? Sumin, food. So they're not speaking in sentences yet. I don't know as a sentence, but food. That's right. Right, good, Sumin. We talked about food. So we've got a simple starting the class with what did we do in our last class? Gets them thinking. It also, just like the transition, it gets them thinking in English. Okay, what did we do in our last class? They have to think, oh, yesterday, what did we do in yesterday's class? We talked about food. Some other things I mentioned a moment ago about taking role, okay? We often will need to take attendance, but often we don't need to. If it's a small group, it's pretty easy. you've got 5 students in your class. If you're, Hagwon maybe has 5 or 10. You've got 5 students, everybody's there. If you've got 9 students, then instead of 10, somebody's missing, it's pretty quickly to see who's not there. But still, there's a lot of times that I'll check attendance even though I know that everybody's there. Because during that time, as a teacher, when I'm checking attendance, I am also checking my students' physical and mental well-being, perhaps. When I'm checking attendance, I'm also checking who is tired, who has lots of energy today, who looks really sad today. I'm sort of going around quickly. It gives me an official reason to check every single student, just a quick little check-in to see how they're doing. So the language we use, let's take roll. Choseok, right? Let's take attendance. Let's check attendance. Let's see who's here today. That's a very casual. Okay, class, let's see who's here today. And you start calling off names. So as you're starting to check attendance, remember to say here when I call you. So Jisoo, ne, no, here, right? Jisoo, here, not ne, not say here. And notice all these. Let's take roll. Let's check attendance. Let's see who's here today. Let's. That's all. Those are the 3 that I have. We use let's because it's informal, and it's a casual. It's kind of comforting. It means we are doing it together. It's not a command. We command sometimes, but for this kind of activity, we don't want to be commanding. Okay, not yet. Sometimes we will. Okay, like we might, when class starts, we might say, "Open your book," "Move your desks." Those are commands. Right? And it's what's called the imperative mood. It's not a grammar tense, not like past tense or future or whatever. It's a mood. So the imperative, you notice there's no subject here. It says open your book. It doesn't say you open your book. Just open your book. It's giving a command. This is something I'm almost embarrassed to say. It was about 10 years ago I learned this. Imperative comes from the same root as emperor or imperial. So this is the language that kings or queens use. Kings or queens don't ask you to open your book. They tell you to open your book. They don't ask you to sit down. They tell you to sit down. They give commands. And so that's where this imperative mood comes from. It is giving orders. Open your book. Move your desks. Sit down. Okay? But we are not kings and queens. Okay, well, probably not. Anyway, we might act like it a little bit in the classroom, but we need to be polite. So we can still say, please, right? Open your books, please, or please open your books. That's no problem. We can say, please move your desks. Okay, it's time to start English. Please move your desks. Put your desks together. Or, our class is ending. Our time is up. Please put them back into the original place. Okay? Sometimes, though, we do need to say more than just oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sometimes we do a negative. Okay? So we can use a negative also. Don't close your books yet. We still don't really have a subject there. We just have the negative. Don't. Don't move your desks. Or you don't need to move your desks. Don't run. You know the song, don't run, don't run, don't run in the classroom. Sometimes we don't want to sing. We just want to say, don't run in the classroom. Okay? It's a command, but it's a negative. Now, sometimes what I started to say, I was getting ahead of myself. Sometimes we can add a person's name. Jiwon, open your book. You boys, sit down. It's a subject, but really it's just clarifying who. You've got 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 people, and you notice one has not opened their book. You say to the person, open the book. So it's a subject, sure, but it's still a command. You boys. There's a couple of them, okay? You don't need to say their name. You boys, sit down. Here's a question. It's more related to a pronunciation class, but it's good here. If I'm giving a command, where do I put the stress? if we're just saying open your book, where do I put the stress? If I put it on the first word, open your book. What if I put it on the third word, open your book? If I say open your book, is that really a command? It is a little bit different, isn't it? If I say open your book, it's not really a command, it's clarifying what to open. Okay? If I say, let's go back to move your desks. Move your desks. Move your desks. Putting the stress on the move is the command. Okay? Move your desks. That means the student heard move and maybe she's moving. It's like, no, move your desks. If you put the stress on the desks, then it's not really so much a command, it's a clarification. Open your books. Open your books. Move, sit down. Oh, what about shut up? That's not very polite. Maybe don't say shut up. Okay? Even if you say please shut up is still kind of a little bit rude. You don't want to do that. So G1, open your books. Boys, sit down now. My teaching tip for you today is, in order to help children learn a new language, we need to use English in class for communication. Okay? We need to use gestures and actions and pictures to help the students understand. Remember, their vocabulary is very limited. But also, this is a bit of a controversial thing to say, let children speak in Korean sometimes, okay? Because many times students need to talk in order to understand. Maybe they need to ask a question to the person next to them. Maybe they need to ask you a question in Korean, in which case you would repeat the question and then answer it in English. But they need to speak their first language a little bit sometimes, okay? Don't always say, don't speak it, because then they'll never speak at all. They need to feel comfortable speaking both languages. Some of the things I talked about I've mentioned it without saying the word, is recast, okay? That's where you say the thing that they just said in a slightly different way. They ask you a question in Korean, you translate it, say it back to them in English, it's the same thing, and then just continue, okay? Students, talk to them a lot in English. Small talk, chatting, okay? Reinforce the idea that language is for communication. It's not just a subject that they take in school. Talk about where things are in the room that they can see, okay? You kind of keep a running dialogue in your mind, a running dialogue of what you're saying as you're going through the class. I'm going to walk over here now and I'm going to do this. So they are hearing what you're doing as you're doing it. You talk about what you're going to do next. You do these things in English, and then they are learning those things indirectly. They're hearing it again and again. Okay, that brings us to the closing. Okay, at the end of every class, we're going to close with a question. What did you learn today? I don't have the answer to that. I know what I said. I don't know what you learned. What did you learn today? And how can you use this information in your own classes? Especially, I think the transitions will be especially useful, some of the language a little bit. In our next lesson, we will look at organizing the classroom and how to bring your lesson to a natural end. That's all. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in our next lesson.